Okay, I've got sound and I'm going to start. It's about a quarter till 11, but as usual, I like to start a little bit early, knowing that there may be some who come in a little bit later than usual. And of course, because this is recorded, you can go back and look at the first part of the recording to pick up where you came in. So it's not that big of an issue. I have a few objectives today and that I'm going to try to get accomplished. And the first thing is just some course logistics to talk about what's going on, where we're headed with things. So I'm going to do that. First of all, this week you have some assignments due. Hammond's Port 2, which is due on the 10th, which is a Friday. Okay. That one's due. Then chapter 12, an exam over it is due on Friday the 10th. Okay, so you have those two assignments ahead of you for this week. Now, I've already talked about Hammond's Port 1 and using that using a simulation, which is what we've been doing. And we're over here in chapter 12. Okay, and I'm going to just take a few minutes, talk about it a little bit more, and then we'll move on. Now, we had left from Hammond's Port 2, which deals with waiting line models. Okay, and we get over now into chapter 12, where we use risk analysis. We use simulation for risk analysis. So we've moved from waiting line problems, okay, to a different style of situation, and that really does have to do with the issue of risk. And again, I would encourage you, when you go over there, and take a look at page 541, and you're going to see figure 12.1 at the very bottom of the page there, a diagram of a simulation model where we look at controllable inputs. We look at probabilistic inputs, those that are typically random and within maybe a model or something like that, and then the output. Okay, so the probabilistic inputs, as they note, are generally are generated utilizing a simulation. Now, I wanted, again, I had the key for Hammond's Port 1, okay, and in that one we had used the waiting line model. And so let's go down here for a moment, and I want to go ahead and take some time, since I'm early, and I'm sure I'll have some folks join me this morning a little bit. On the 13th and the 15th and the 17th. Let me say this. On the 15th of November, which is a week from today, obviously, I will be pre-recording screencasts for this course and for the MIS course. I have to haul somebody to medical care, and that's just how it is. And there's just no way I can negotiate getting them there, back. It's in Oklahoma City and back to class on business. So I will be doing pre-recorded sessions, and I'll have those posted so you can see them and basically have class. Okay. Now, what I will also do, and you can see here, I haven't published it yet, the key to Hammond's Port 2 and a screenshot regarding it. And then you have some resources there. I provided you a PowerPoint for chapter 13, and I really recommend that you take a look at it. Then here's a guide to what we call the tree plan and a tree plan example. Okay, and chapter 13 moves us into the realm of forecasting. And so I have a resource there that speaks with you about the difference between estimation, extrapolation, prediction, and forecasting. And then we do that, and we apply those concepts within within a capital budget issue, okay? And I have some other resources there, short course in super forecasting, the Good Judgment Project, Nate Silver, a well-known pollster, and that Nate Silver's 538 site. And you have a PDC project that's due the 17th, which is a Friday, and then chapter 13, 14, and 15, you have exams over them, okay? So I'm just kind of running us through where we are. Then as we come down to week 13 or module 13, there is no class on Wednesday or Friday. That's Thanksgiving holiday. That's during that module 13. You have the Anderson text, and you have that due, okay. The AHP in Excel, that's due December 1st, okay. And then the scoring case is due on December 1st. All right, and we'll look here in December 1st, okay, is a Friday, okay, and that's the Friday after you get back from Thanksgiving, and then then we'll move into module 14, and as you can see, we're moving at that point in time where you have major projects. And so I give you that week to work on them. It's flex time. Ditto, okay. SAP, the SAP problems, okay. Now I've got instructions for those, and then we move into finals. So we are rapidly headed towards that point in time where you'll be working primarily on projects and on the final, and getting and focusing on that, okay. So again, it's 10:53, and I'm sure in the next 5 to 10 minutes I'll have some people join. And I do want to let you know about the 15th. Now, as I said before, I will pre-record a session on the 15th, so you have, and I'll do the same thing in MIS. Those are the two classes I have on Wednesday, and I'll be providing them a pre-recorded session as well. And I do appreciate the fact that you've taken to this quite well. I'm happy to see the folks who are participating or coming in doing their work. I think you finally get it, how convenient this is, how it can take the insanity of trying to juggle classes, practices, working, and all that, and control it, okay. And you can look at this thing at 12 o'clock at night if you have a computer or a tablet or a phone. So I think this is not the same as sitting in a class and all that. But let me say something. From here on out, and glad to have you here. As I mentioned before, let's see who this is. Hi, Alexa. You'll want to go back, Alexa. You'll want to go back to. Well, once I save the recording and post it, you can pop back at the very first. I've been on for a while, but again, what I was about to say was that one of the skills I hope you're building are two of them. One, how to manage your time, and number two, how to learn on your own to become self-driven learners, because you're going to have to do that throughout your career. And again. You see kind of what you have ahead of you. It's pretty typical of what I do. We get down the last couple of weeks or so, and I give you, projects that need to be done. And then of course you can start to work on your final exams. Part of them are due at the start, part of them are due at the end of the final exam period. And I have pretty detailed, I do have detailed instructions for what to do. Well, this week, again, we're back here, and today is the 8th, all right? And when we met Monday, we went over the Hammondsport, we went over the Hammondsport case, and that one, was where we utilize, we're simulating data to try and figure out arrival times working within a queue, and I'm going to download that file for just a second, okay? And Hammondsport 1 is where we have, as I mentioned before, we talked about this in class, we have one ATM, okay? And we simulate the arrival times using, we simulate them using the random function. Now, you come down to row 15, you're going to see the, the labels. Then 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, you see cases 1 through 4, customers 1 through 5, excuse me. Then the last 5 customers, and so as you can see, we have a whole bunch of rows hidden, and that's just, so we're not scrolling up and down, and we just froze the pane there. Now, again, as we talk about simulation, and this is over at the start of the chapter, page 541. The authors provide us the model, okay, for simulation, what I would call a general model. And this goes along with this whole notion where we've gone through saying, okay, management science differentiates between problem solving and decision making. And management science says, can I find a model that I can turn into an objective function with decision variables, with constraints, and can I choose among one of the 3, minimization, maximization, or a target value? And at the bottom of page 541, they show you a simulation model where we have what we call controllable inputs. Those are things in which we have control. Then probabilistic inputs. Those are things that randomly generated. And then the output. Now, let's look at this for just a minute. You say, well, where's the application of the random? And I had given everybody, let's see who else is here. Okay, I see Amanda and Suzanne. Glad to have you here. And again, you'll want to, I started early as I usually do, and you can, once I've saved and recorded this, you can go, once I record it and post it, you can go back and catch it on the front end. Now, where we have these enter-arrival times, and literally that means a person comes into the queue, then they start being serviced. We might have another, and enter-arrival means, all right, we have people coming into the queue, and so we have multiple arrivals. And if you walk over to page, where they really show this and explain it to us as they walk through this process, and I'm going back through, you can see we'll move away a bit. Let's see, I want to find this for just a second. Yeah, the customer arrival times over on page 562 in the chapter, okay? And there in 563, they talk about the probability distribution of service times. They show us that model where here we have the controllable inputs are the number of ATMs. The probabilistic ones are the enter-arrival times. That is, who's arriving, how fast. The service time, that's probabilistic, okay? And then the output, which is the operating characteristic. Now, literally over on page 566, I would really encourage you, if you really want to understand this, okay, you can look at the flow chart that's over on page 564, and it shows you each step of the way. Now, when people study waiting line or queuing theory problems, be it dealing with an ATM, be it dealing with a station, building a car, or at Amazon's warehouse, picking up orders, etc. That model, that flow chart is a schematic. We talked about this at the first of the course, okay? And then we convert it into that equation, and we find the objective function, we find our controllable inputs, the probabilistic inputs, and then we use the simulation to generate a probability, what we call a probability distribution. Now, when you have statistics, and this is important for you as a manager, if you understand two things, it will take you a long way. One is understanding that no decision, the outcome, there's no decision on this planet except for, you know, how you deal with your response to Jesus Christ is black and white. It's along a continuum of really, really good stuff or really, really bad stuff, or just kind of what we expected. Okay, and then things like arrival times, those are maybe sometimes they follow a normal curve. Sometimes they look like an S curve. Marketing people will talk about the S curve. You'll hear people talk about the Poisson, which mimics that. We know, for example, with marginal revenue, marginal cost, those are concave and convex kinds of distributions. So when you think in those terms, okay, now you're really starting to see and function. You'll be operating as a manager, knowing that you're working within a given constraint of inputs, okay, controllable inputs, and a lot of probabilistic kinds of factors. And so that changes you from being a naive decision maker to being one a little more sophisticated. Now we see this play out in simulation here in chapter 12. When you get over to chapter 13, what's going to happen is you're going to see that as you learn about forecasting and you study that. Well, you said, okay, so these are our outputs, okay, here are summary statistics, okay, and we use the countif function, and if it's greater, we give a count if it's greater than 0, okay, and then we have the probability of weighting, and that's the E08 E1018 over 900 because we have 900 cases. All right, then we have the average waiting time, the maximum waiting time, the utilization of the ATM, how much is it utilized, okay, and that's a function of arrivals and service times. Then the number waiting greater than a minute, and the probability of waiting later than a minute, because we've determined that 1 minute it starts to get us into the max. And I provided all of you some resources, and I'm going to diminish this for just a sec here and go back and remind you of all of those resources. Now, you say, why are we kind of repeating this? Because it bears repeating, that's why. And, I'll say this again, okay? I don't care what business you're in. To some extent, there are two things that have to happen. One of them is you got to make a sale. And number two, that sale must be fulfilled, called order fulfillment. If you don't deliver on both, you're not in business, okay? So I'm not a marketer, but I understand the concept that I got to have sales. And if I have sales, I've got to have order fulfillment, okay? Let's say I run a car dealer. There's a car dealer in Oklahoma City, Bob Moore, my wife and I are dealing with them. They have to sell cars, but they've got to repair cars. And when they sell you a car, they've got to go through a whole series of things to sell it. That's the order fulfillment, okay? And their people get trained and tested on all the steps to show you how your car works when you buy it and all that stuff. Okay, all that being said, you'll note that this week I provided you a whole series of resources talking about queuing theory. And I think of all of I understand your young people. And I was just like you when I was your age. I knew it all. And I understand. That's just part of the beauty of being young, okay? And I admire that and I love it, okay? It's a wonderful thing. But over the years, you accumulate a little wisdom, and fortunately, a lot of life is wisdom acquired the hard way. You make mistakes. And I'd say if you really wanted to see the power of this idea, okay, look at this article, this resource about Southwest Airlines. Just a simple idea. Gee, if we can cut our service time down 10 minutes, we can have that much more time flying. And we can do it with fewer planes than our competitors. In other words, with a third or half or 60 to 70% of the number of their major planes, okay, they handled more passengers, and that meant more revenue and more market share. How did they do it? It's simple. Those planes were just going all the time. As I told you, my parents are entrepreneurs. My father was one of those people, you may have never even heard of the concept of an independent grocers association, or an IJ. My dad was one of the first retailers in grocery stores to ever go 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, okay? And he never went to business school. I made him go take his GED so he'd get a high school diploma. He came back 40 minutes later and looked at me and said, "Was that high school?" And I thought, this man is just, I didn't inherit the genius. My parents were just extremely smart people. But he understood about arrival times. He understood if he had his store open all the time, the marginal revenue that he the marginal revenue would play itself out, because he had this giant warehouse of a store center. It's a fixed cost. So if you look at any of these talking about arrival times and queuing theory, this one is exceptionally important. Now, you don't remember it because you were too young, and some of you weren't even born. Within a month, this is when the United States and its allies invaded Iraq. Within a month, they moved 500,000 people in a month with all of their equipment, with all of the facilities, halfway across the world. That was an incredible logistical feat. And I think at that point, if I saw that happen, and I was Saddam Hussein, I would have said, "Let's talk." He was stupid and decided to take them on. And and the tactic that was a tactic in itself. It was one that harkened back to the Roman wars. The Roman Empire, as they were having a pushback from the Germanic tribes, decided to build a bridge across the Ruhr River. Now, this is ancient Rome. There are no, they don't have modern technologies, computers, CAD, CAM, but the Romans were master engineers. And so they built a pontoon bridge across the Ruhr River, put 30,000 men across, had them in a full camp. And when they camped, they built berms, and they did that in about 3 days to send a message. We can come after you and we will get you. Don't play games with us. And that kind of quelled things with their northern neighbors for quite a while. So if you get anything, this article ought to tell you the power of these techniques, okay? I'll give you another example. Fast food. You guys have grown up with fast food, okay? I remember a day and time when you ate out 3 times a year for somebody's birthday, for somebody's graduation, and maybe a holiday like the 4th of July. You never ate out for Christmas. You never ate out for Thanksgiving. I'll never forget my mother-in-law, bless her heart. She's in her early 90s. The first year my wife and I were married, we're who we are, and we said, we cooked up a big bird, and then we said, okay, we got this burger, got this stuff, and and wife said, why don't we just go to Cracker Barrel because they have a great Thanksgiving Day menu. And I said, look, when I go eat with old people, put me in a home. But we went, and I thought, we spent about 1/10 of what we just spent for a bird the whole bit. Okay, so there's a great lesson there. Now I've also I have a resource there to look at in terms of Starbucks. Okay, then basic waiting line models. I'm a great believer if you understand the waiting line models or the adoption if you understand the S curve of adoption, that there are early adopters and then the late majority, the early majority, then late majority, then the laggards, okay, you're going to understand a lot about marketing, okay, and what's entailed. Now, the Poisson is one we've got here, and I have a resource there about Excel's normal distribution functions. And I want you to get some time and take a look at it because it will show you how Excel is a tool that can help us understand the probability of arrivals or the probability of events. Well, that being said, I'm going to go back here to Hammondsport. I'll open it up for just a second. All right. And you say, well, how did we do where's the randomization? Well, here we are. Now, notice what we've got going on. We've got the smallest value plus a random value times B5, which is the largest value, minus B4. What that randomization, by putting that rand function in front, okay, of B5 minus B4, we basically produce a random number added on to our smallest value. And that rand produces that probabilistic input, okay? And the same thing, you notice they're volatile. So when I put one in here and then I get out, they change. Now as I mentioned, there are settings in Excel that are designed to freeze those, but then you don't really get the value of randomization, okay? And I've given you guys an assignment to obtain a probability of the waiting time, and then obtain a maximum waiting time by changing the mean time of service. Now let me say this, all right? In terms of these values up here, the largest value, okay, and then the mean service times or standards, all right, these are going to be based upon industry figures or historic figures within the company. And so you almost have to look, and I'll say this many times, when you look at one of these cases and we look at one of these Excel sheets, think that this is almost like, from an operating standard, you're looking at a pro forma, okay? In finance, a pro forma means a form for the sake of a pro forma is a management tool, okay? And like a statement of cash flows, well, a better one would be a cash budget, okay? And I'm going to make so many units in January, and it'll cost a lot. You've probably done those problems for Dr. Reader in finance, okay? And what's the same story here? We're working with a pro forma, okay? Now, I'm going to close this one off for just a second, and I want to look at this second. And here's the Hammondsport key. All right, I have that for you. And then I want to look at the norming burst. Now, this is a short introduction to the normal distribution functions, okay? And again, if you look here, you're going to see something that I learned a long time ago back when I took my very first statistics course, okay? And here's the deal. The normal distribution function, this is a Gaussian distribution, i.e., aka the bell curve, assumes that if things are distributed quote unquote normally, okay, they will approximate this model. Now, if I took this bell curve, this model, and I put it running sideways, then I have a linear regression model. Okay, linear regression just looks at the linear regression looks at the rise and the run, basically. Okay, so you'll see it's 34. I learned it 34, 14, and 2, 34, 14, 2, and up to 3 sigma. Okay, above and below the mean. And so this helps us say, all right, okay, how much of an outlier is a piece of data? Okay, and I really want you to take a look at it. It gives us some definitions about it, and some of the statistics function summary or statistics they provide. Now, it's important, okay, to talk about this for a very important reason. You've got to understand the difference between a sample and a population. Now, I'm hoping, I'm praying that when you took stats, they talked about this, and they may have, but maybe not in a way that you and I can take it and use it in the real world. If I have a set of customers, okay, let's say I'm a wholesaler, and they buy in pretty predictable patterns. I can pretty much assume I'm working with population data. And so population data, like the standard deviation of a population, the standard deviation P, okay, I can use that. Now, it's a more stringent statistic because it assumes you understand and know that population. So, well, what do you mean? Well, one piece would be sales data. If I have 20 years of sales data with my 155 clients or customers, it's pretty simple. I know what's going on. Now, I say this because when we move into the next chapter and you start to work with forecasting, the question you always have to ask yourself is this: is the past a prelude to the present? You say, Dr. Harmon, I know this is management science. We're not doing a whole bunch of equations. You keep correct. I look at this course as a way to inoculate you against being overwhelmed by a whole bunch of numbers, to inoculate you from the idea that if I can quantify something, I can control it. Ain't no way, okay? Or if I can quantify something, it tells me something about it. I want to take you for a moment, and I want to show you something out that I saw at the New York Times the other day. And I think it was at the New York Times, or it was the LA Times. I can't remember. Let me search here real quick. This was, I think this is over in one of their op-ed pieces. Okay, and let me see if I can find that. Let me look here for just a second. If not, I'll have to do a little bit better. Hang on just a minute. Because it was really, really striking. Okay, here, this is, yeah, it was CNN. Now, this compared the United States, okay, versus the rest of the world in terms of civilian-owned guns. And they give us some bar charts, and I think this is the one, but it shows, I believe it showed if you look, this may not be the one, but they showed a linear trend line, okay? And what they showed was in the United States, the number of mass shootings, okay, as a huge outlier in the United States versus the rest of the world. The only country in the world that comes close to us in terms of gun violence is Yemen. Okay, yeah, we're right up there in some good company. But what was implied was that there's a direct relationship between gun ownership and mass shootings. The more gun ownership, the higher the mass shootings. Now I'm saying this not because I'm advocating anything at all about guns. Don't say, listen, I know how to use them. I've got them. Okay, I'm a safe user of them. And so I'm not an anti-gun nut, nor am I for a gun nut. Okay, I've had a lot of friends. I go to gun shows. Sometimes it disturbs me when I see a lot of weapons that look like stuff that we used in the service. And I told my neighbors one time, I said, if you have to have an AR-15 at home, it's time to move. Okay, and I'll close with that. But the whole idea was that the more guns people own, the more likely we're to have more mass shootings. Well, that's assuming, okay, causation. Sometimes causation, you can't always assume, because two things are correlated. They're causal in nature. So it's that kind of thinking that you'll need to start to develop. And part of it is understanding things like the difference between a population, okay, and a population and a sample. And so they walk you down here to the norm distribution, okay, and this is where you test a value, okay, and you get a probability, okay, for that value. And you've done this, you work through, and then you create a z-score, and you start to say, okay, what's the probability? And you can work that out with N, one standard deviation above or below. You can work it on the right-hand side of the tail, okay? Ditto the left-hand side if you care to do that. High sigma values. But there are a lot of statistics there to help you understand them, and I really do encourage you to take a look at them, okay? Now, I'm going to go back for a moment and take us down here for just a sec. And in these resources that I have here, okay, this is the norm distribution. It's the mirror, okay, of the norm inverse, okay? And we calculate the normal probability to density function. That is, what are the parameters that we're looking at? And that's all. Now, as I mentioned before, the famous S-curve, okay, here's that cumulative distribution function. Here's the normal density function, all right? And so you would be wise to look through them and understand how it is that how they apply to things like waiting line problems, okay? And I have this also, using that function in Hammond's port 2, okay? So you'll be working on that next week. Well, that being said, okay, I want to also talk real quickly again, and just to kind of reiterate this business about different types of queuing systems, okay, and queuing models, okay, and there are some models based upon the arrangement of the service facility, okay? Single queue, yeah, a multiple queue. And you can see how the probabilities can really become very complex based upon the layers of service as we service facilities or service process, okay? And so there's some good stuff there before you take that. Now let me say this. This course is an introduction to management science. That's the name of the course. And just about every chapter we've covered, we can have an entire course on those chapters, certainly on queuing theory and arrival times and distribution, okay? And, you know, when you and I get on an airplane and we fly somewhere and we get there around the time that we figured we would, yeah. Number one, thank God we get there, okay? Number two, we arrived about the time. And people go, oh, the plane is 30 minutes late. Well, you know, look, if it's 5 hours late, that's one thing. If it's 30 minutes late, that's another. Okay. And when you think about how many flights are in the air at any given time, you know, the air above us is a whole city of people flying around in aluminum tubes, and you know, or you know, alloy and aluminum alloy tube, okay? They're just incredible. That modern air travel is a miraculous thing, okay? And all I can tell you is, you know, yeah, it's crowded and the people are nasty at times and all that. And if you want to be treated decently, you got to pay an exorbitant price. But the ability for you and I to get on an airplane, fly to Europe, okay, is an incredible thing. And to go to Australia and be there in 17 hours is unbelievable, okay? So, and all of those waiting times, that queue, that's got to be finely tuned, even down to the runway from which a plane departs and the runway from which a plane arrives. And, you know, I speak about that a lot because I remember my dad had a pilot and he flew all over the southwest part of the United States. And when you do that, you learn a whole lot about how that all works, and you come to appreciate that kind of thing. And the sad part is when I get on a commercial liner, it's like, you know, a lot of people are white knuckled with that. I understand. I just I fall asleep because to me it's really not flying. But you know, that's for another discussion. Anyway, I do have some good resources here for you, and I want you to take a look at them and invest some time. Now, I want to talk for just a minute, and we'll get into this some more on Monday. I did start, I think, about 15 or 16 minutes early, so we're about at our 15-minute mark. Somehow 15 minutes is magical. What can I say? And we're going to be looking at, we're going to start to move into forecasting, okay? And let me recommend that you take a couple of shortcuts and looking at the material. You say, what do you mean? But watch. Chapter 13, I have the PowerPoint for you, okay? And you'd be wise to download it and take a look at it because it summarizes a lot of that material. Then I want you to see a tree plan guide. So what in the world is a tree guide? What is a tree guide? Well, here's the tree plan. Okay, I'm going to download it. And what it is it just a tree plan is really nothing more than a decision tree. Okay, and as you can see here, we start to look at alternatives and probabilistic outcomes of those multiple decisions as they flow through. So I would really want you to take a look at the PowerPoint, okay, and to look at the guide, because what we try to do is to build a kind of like a flow chart, if you will, to which we attach probabilistic outcomes, okay. And you'll see that as we talk to it. Now, in addition to that, I want you to take a look at this example, okay, of a tree plan. All right. And then for sure, take a look at and do these before you read chapter 13. And I think they'll put 13 will be for you a more coherent experience in terms of understanding about forecasting. And again, you know, I had, you know, as most of you know, I grew up here, went to school here at OU, then finished. I got degrees at OU, and one of my friends in my doctoral program, he and I did a lot of consulting work on behalf of the people, the man who was the chair of our committee and different committee members. And one of the ways that they would fund, they pay people to in graduate school was they'd give us work. And because they'd get more work than they could do, so it's okay, we'll try this. This is a way to see if we'd follow through all that kind of stuff. To make a long story short, we were asked to do some population projections for a bunch of school districts out in the western part of the southwestern part of the state. And so we did that, and so and they wanted to see different models, okay? And so the one model that we favored the most was adaptive forecasting, where we could dampen or we could undampen the factor, so we could make we could change the pattern of growth, high or low. But the big argument that we had, okay, was the issue of type 1 versus type 2 error. Now, you hopefully heard about that when you were taking your stat course, and if you take policy with me, you definitely hear about that. And the two types of error, one is a false positive, the other is a false negative. Okay, and they were going to make decisions on building school buildings and all this stuff on the basis of these forecasts, and so we had to have a long discussion with the board members of these schools about what the practical implications of whether we over or under forecasted. And I remember one very dear, very sweet lady, she got really upset with us because she said, "Can't you tell me exactly how many kids will be enrolled in our school in the year 1995? And I said, "The good Lord can, but I can't." I said, "I can tell you within a range," okay? And that range may be broad enough that you either will or will not have to significantly expand your your elementary school, and thereby your high school. They didn't have a middle school at that point. Kids went 1 to 6, then they had a junior high, pardon me, then 7, 8, 9, and then the 10, 11, 12. We could tell them within a range. And I said, if you're at the bottom of the range, you probably won't have to build. If you're top of the range, it's temporary buildings, and then you raise the money, you hope you get the people to approve the bond. So which type of risk are you more of? How much risk aversion do you have? Okay. Well, I dampened the forecasts down, okay, and then as over the years, as I've communicated with them, they said, "Well, you came in low." And I said, "Better I came in low, okay, and you at that point just were simply adding on, then I came in high, but the students didn't appear, the growth didn't appear, and you've built buildings that you can't put people in." I said, "Which world would you have rather lived in?" And they always say, "Yeah, you're right. That was the wise thing to do. Smartest thing we could have possibly done." Okay. Well, enough of those stories. And trust me, I've got plenty of them. And the gray hair and wrinkles, I have earned them all. But as you move into that, I also would like you to take a look at the business case and business case analysis. I'd like, before you read the chapter, okay, and I really encourage, if you're a marketing major, you especially need to read chapter 13. I encourage you to take a look at these sources, okay, And then we'll talk about the PDC project, and that one is one that's going to be due. So just since we got a little bit more time here, I'm going to do this real quickly. I'm going to go over to the files, and we're going to look at the PDC project from chapter 13. So go over to files, okay? And chapter 13, I want to find out what page where it's at, the PDC project. The PDC project. Where are you, my little friend? What page? I know you're over in 13. And you see some of your old friends, the payoff table, which is a tree, just it's a payoff table, just inverted a little bit. And the expected value of perfect information. There's some good stuff in there. I want to find that PDC project for you. Here we are. The PDC project starts. Okay, back on 13.7. They walk you through sensitivity, a whole series of things. Let's look at this for just a minute. I'm going to open up the files. And we'll talk about it in some greater length. I'm just going to let you get your feet wet with it very, very gingerly. Let's see, find the MIS web files. There we are. We'll download that. And we'll take a look there at the chapter 13. And we'll look at the Excel files. And there's the PDC. And I'm just going to open this, okay, just so we can look at it, kind of get a feeling of what we've got going on here, okay? It's a tree, okay? Now I want to show you just quickly the basic, the basic structure here, okay? We're starting all at 0, and they're building, I can't remember what it is, if they're building something. I think maybe it was, see, I haven't looked at this case for a little bit. I mean, they're building something, or they're doing some research. Okay. And oh, it's a series, it's some condominiums. That's right. It's condominiums. I'm sorry. And they build none that, okay, they go small, medium, or large in terms of the number of units and the payoffs and all that business. Okay, and you'll see that as we walk through that next week. But I forget, and I apologize. PDC, the case involves a builder who's trying to figure out, they're going to build a condominium, or should they build it all, or do we want to have a small number of units, medium or large, based upon market conditions, costs, etc. And it's a very extensive case. All right, and they walk you through all that and the decision tree, and the text does a really nice job of covering that. Okay, and we'll take a look at that on Monday and focus on it. And then, as I said before, on the 15th of November, which is a week from today, I'll have another pre-recorded session for you. I have to do the same thing for the MIS course. I've got to got to do some hauling people to the doctor kind of thing. And so I'm thankful I have this, so I can do 2 good deeds. One is fill your heads full of useless knowledge, and number 2, help some people out to get to the doctor. So, I won't miss class. You shouldn't miss class. I'll have the pre-record up there for you to see. Okay, and we'll go, and so we always do have that to look at, and that's really like the lecture. But I just wanted to warn you that, and I'll remind you guys of that so that you're prepared to see. And we'll cover this PDC project. In fact, I think it's the only thing I have due for you that week. Let me look here for just a minute, because you can tell in chapter 13 it is abundant. That case is a huge one. Okay. And if you could get that and understand decision trees and all that business, you're a long, long way down the road. Let's see here. Flyers. Now we're down to 13. Yeah, Hammond's Port 2. That was due on the 10th. Yeah, the PDC project will be due the 17th. Okay. Okay, my friends, listen, that does it. And I do appreciate all of you being here. I'll stop for a moment and make sure I recognize Alexa, who's been here for the whole thing, practically. Alexander, Amanda, and Suzanne, thank you for stopping by. And I will see everybody on Monday. Again, do some of that pre-reading I was suggested before you get into chapter 13. And that'll kind of get your feet wet and get you ready to absorb all the detail that's there in 13. Thank you very much, everybody. And I'm going to stop the share and then stop the recording.